one guy made an attempt to escape from our camp. A British officer. He was able to. He spoke German fluently, and he had managed to get a hold of some German money, and he made civilian clothes out of his uniform. He dyed his uniform and he made it appear like a civilian suit. And he managed to get out of the camp. Trouble was, where we were, this is a representation of where we were in the camp. This model of our prison camp. We were in a valley, a narrow valley. All the Germans had to do was to plug up both ends of the valley. Either that or he'd have to go over the top of the mountains. He was gone for about 30 days, and he got about 50 miles. And then they picked him up. They brought him back, and they put him in a cooler for 30 days.
What did you do all day?
What did we do all day?
Yeah.
Well, I could probably tell you the life story of everybody that was in the camp. We did a lot of talking. We shared, and I can ask Russ this question. You know, what did we used to talk about? I'll ask you that question. What do you think we talked about?
Don't ask.
Most of you will be wrong. Most of you will be wrong. I don't know about Ed, but most of you will be wrong. You'll guess wrong. We asked the kids in the classroom when we go, and they said, "What do you think we talked about?"
Women.
Women were way down the list. Rudy's right. Food. We talked about food. We used to fantasize about the food. We used to talk about all of the different places we've ever been that had good food and what we were going to do when we got back with the food. Went crazy talking about what would be the ideal meal. And the British had different ideas about it, and they'd say, "Oh God, we'd never eat that stuff." And they were talking about kidney pie.
In our camp, we used to spend the day mostly trying to figure out what we could do to screw the Germans up and make it more difficult for them. And when we weren't doing that, which was most of the day, making things, stealing things, robbing the wood for fires, we'd play poker, setback, bridge, checkers, anything, chess. But that was about it as far as spending the day.
Did you have any books?
Well, they had books, and they had a few books, and we had our own band, and they used to put on. We had theater, had our own theater. They used to put on a show every once in a while. The Germans loved to come and see them. And
we never had any shows, but we had. The British sent us a lot of paperbacks that we got. I used to read a lot of books, and every day we would take a walk around the compound as far as we could. We had a routine. We did a lot of walking around, and went in to see the different barracks to sail. Some of the guys couldn't get out of bed. They were. I should have mentioned that our particular prison camp was for people that had been wounded and were recovering. It was not a normal camp in that respect. Everybody there was banged up. So some of our guys were in bed. So we used to go around and we used to visit with them a little bit. And as Ed said, we used to do what we could do to bug the
Another
Germans.
thing I got to tell you about that we always thought was quite comical, and we really enjoyed doing it. Every once in a while, the Germans would come in about 6 o'clock in the morning. "Raus, Mitchum! Raus, raus!" So out we would go,
Mark Snell.
take all our belongings with us, out into the compound, and then they had dogs and steel rods, and they were going around the barracks and the camp looking for tunnels. Well, they had German guards right in the compound where we were. We had to cook our meals and eat and everything out there. Well, the Germans loved American cigarettes, and we knew it. So whenever you were going to light up a cigarette, we used to try to get a German guard right in front of us. We'd take out a cigarette and accidentally drop one on the ground. And we'd take our foot and push it into the ground. Man, I'll tell you, them Germans. And then they used to walk around with their rifle over their shoulder. Some guy would get their attention and talk to them, and somebody else would come up with a handful of sand and drop it down the barrel of his gun. And then they used to go and pick the dandelions and the buttercups out of the compound, stick them in the barrel. And I'm going to tell you, when their officers would see them flowers, there was hell to pay, which made us very happy.
How about on your letter writing?
All right, this one here, go ahead.
Was there any torturing?
None,
No.
not in our camp,
No, no torturing. The worst punishment we had was the 30 days in the cooler.
Right, that was the torture.
And
Go
how
ahead.
long were you actually?
Did they allow you guys, if you were in long enough in the summer months, could you guys plant a garden or try to raise?
No, we had no garden.
No way of raising your
There
own?
was nothing could grow there. It was useless land. It was-
Ours was rocky too. Yeah, nothing would grow there.
How about your letter writing?
Once a week, but
A
not
little while ago
not
you
a
said
single.
excuse me. A little while ago you said there was a lot of Russians in your camp,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Now, this camp was probably from all walks of the war. They weren't all air people, were they?
No, they weren't.
No.
The-
Our camp was
there were some-
100% Air Force.
Well, that's what I meant.
His camp was, but my camp was mixed. There were about 200 British. There were about 35 Americans. There were several hundred French. There were some Italians, and there were gazillions Russians. I don't know how many Russians there were. They were all over the place, the Russians. But they had a separate compound. They didn't let them. The Russians didn't want to have their people mixed with us. They were treated much more harshly than we were.
And how?
They were not signatories to the Geneva Convention, and the Germans didn't even try to treat them decently. If there was any dirty job to be done, they sent the Russians out to do it. If some bombs fell on a town, which they did quite frequently, somebody had to go in and dig them out. They'd send the Russians to do it. If there's any repair work to be done, they send the Russians out. Now, on the other hand, the Russians were the best scroungers of any people I ever saw. They could steal you blind in no time at all.
In our camp, they used the Italians most of the time. They used to come in and bail out our latrine, put the stuff in the honey wagon, which was a big wooden drum on the back of a wagon, and fill that up, and they would take that out to the farms and spread it around the farms as fertilizer. And then one day they brought in a bunch of Italians, and they started digging holes along the main road. And they were putting posts in there. They were going to separate the compound. Well, the next day they come back to put the wire on, but there was nothing to put the wire on. The guys had gone out and taken all the poles and used them for firewood.
So you had poles in your camp?
I didn't hear that one.
Just as well.
Question over there.
Oh, we had poles.
You said in your camp there's quite a few wounded personnel.
Yes.
How was the medical for you people in those camps?
Well, it was mediocre, to put it mildly.
Was it our guys or was it their guys that?
We had one German doctor who was supposed to be in charge of the medical treatment of the camp, but quite honestly, most of the doctoring was done by a prisoner of war British doctor. He saw us and took care of us the best he could. And I will say that probably they did about as much as they could. They were very short of everything at this point. They didn't have penicillin, for instance.
The only thing they had was sulfur.
They were using sulfur, and that wasn't in very big supply either. So people with wounds, they tended to heal very, very slowly indeed. You know, in fact, the people that died from wounds because they wouldn't heal up. So it isn't that they mistreated us; it's just that they didn't give us much. They didn't have much to give. A question back there, yes.
Last year I met a fellow in Southington, Carl Josephson. He was shot down in the Rhine River and saved by the Dutch. And he wound up in one of the Stalag camps. And he said that the German fighters, after they were shot down, the fighters chased them all the way to the ground, firing at them as they're going down their parachutes.
Well, that's why I delayed my parachute jump. I figured I fell approximately 15,000 feet before I opened my chute, because I didn't want the German fighters to shoot at me. And when I was hanging in my parachute after I opened it, there's two fighters coming, but they just went right by me. Then there was a little plane like a Taylor Cub come up, and he circled all around me. He gave me a salute, and he took off. I figured he was radioing my position in so they could come and capture me. But that was the worst I went through.
This man I'm talking about, he was in one of your Stalag camps for about a year and a half, and he kept a diary, and he let me have it to look at it. And he was treating it like it was just an ordinary diary. He died a short time after I met him in Southington, and I told his widow, I said, for crying out loud, make sure that this diary is taken care of, because I don't know how many fellows you met that would bother to keep a diary while they were in the Stalag. But and he had pictures of his room and everything else. It was beautiful. I'll have to see if I can find her and see if she's still around, to see if she's taking good care of it.
You know,
tell her about the POW museum.
well, that's what I was going to mention. Where that belongs probably is at Andersonville.
Yeah, because to me it's priceless.
Does everyone know about Andersonville?
He showed it to me.
Yeah.
He loaned it to me for a couple of hours, and it was unbelievable. He made the cover out of his underwear, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And he had beautiful artwork, poetry,
Yeah.
and an entire diary from the time he took off in England until he was freed as a prisoner.
How many camps were there? Part of Stalag.
There were over 50.
Over 50.
Over 50. I have a map up here that shows where they were. It's a tiny map, but afterwards you're going to take a look at it. You can't go by the numbers. It's like Stalag 18, Stalag 19, because some of them had several locations. There was Stalag 18A, Stalag 18B, 18C, and so on. So, but there were over 50 different installations. Most of them were right in central Germany.
Germany and Austria.
Some were in East Prussia, and those are the ones that were threatened by the Russians' advance. And then we were down in Austria,
Right.
where we were
Not too far from each other.
Our camps were not too far from each other, right? I was in 18A, and he was in 17B. Yeah. And for a
How many
city.
American POWs were there in that 50 camps, and what was the total population?
I can't remember. I was going to look that up before I came tonight, but I can't
It was
remember.
4,300 in our camp alone. We were just one of the many.
In some of the camps, John, there was as many as 10,000 Americans. Can you believe that?
Well, you said your camp had 100,000, more than 100,000 total.
Oh,
times
but
50.
that was all nationalities.
Yeah, I'm saying, but if you multiply that times 50, you're looking at 5 million POWs.
Well, they weren't all
Stellar
that, they weren't all
17
that,
was
they
one
weren't
of
all
the
that
biggest
large,
camps there
John.
was.
They weren't all that large. They varied all over. They had a lot of work camps. They used to send. They were so short of manpower. They used to send work parties out to work on the farms. Well, those guys had a life for you. They used to stay right there at the farmhouse, and they used to work on the farm. But they wouldn't send anybody, sergeants or
We wanted to go out, and they
they
wouldn't
wouldn't
let
send
us.
them out. Yeah.
Art, when the war ended, how were you two fellas notified or released? Were American troops came and opened your camp up, or did the Germans do it, or what?
Well, I can tell you how my camp was. We were overrun by the British Eighth Army, which came up from Italy into Austria, and they got to our camp about 2 or 3 days before the end of the war, before the formal ending, and within a few days after VE Day, we came out of there by ambulance. They sent in ambulances, and they carried us out to the town of Klagenfurt, and from there we were evacuated back to Italy. The Americans and the British were doing that. Some of the people took forever to get back, but we were lucky that they got us out right away.
How about you, Ed?
Our camp was liberated by Patton's army, his tanks. We were up on the high level. We used to have to go down a very steep incline to get water out of the Inns River in order to get water. And then it was all flat fields across the river. And this day we could hear all this noise. We didn't know what the hell was going on. We all went over to the cliff, and there's all these tanks coming through that open field. And we were all worried because we heard after that they were getting ready to start shelling us. Because we were living in the forest, no barracks, nothing, just whatever huts we could make out of the trees and the bark. And they were getting ready to shell us when our camp commandant, our commander, the sergeant, and the German commandant went down and surrendered the camp to Patton's army. And they were on the other side of the river. And they couldn't get to us for a few days until they got a bridge across. But they did have a small bridge, and a couple of jeeps come over, and there was one jeep came in with a colonel and 2 sergeants. And he talked with us, and he was like Patton. He had pistols on both sides with the light pearl handles. And then there was a German guard, an officer, still walking around. The colonel says, "What's this man doing with pistol and guns on him?" So he told his sergeants, "Get them off of him." So the sergeants went over and they tore him off and they threw him in the jeep. Well, I just happened to be there. Everybody grabbed. I grabbed the dagger, somebody grabbed the pistol, and somebody else grabbed the belt. I still got the dagger. My kids decided to flip it at the trees. So they kind of damaged it, but I still have it. And on the blade, it's written, "Alles für Deutschland." And it was an officer's dagger. And it's probably about that long, sharp on both edges.
Should have brought it tonight.
I forgot.
Huh?
Yeah, I forgot.
You forgot. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
On this forced march, how far did you go on the 19 days?
Mileage, I don't know. We marched for 19 days. We stayed over at night in open fields, or if we could find barns or something like that, we'd stay in the barns. And when we got to where we were going, it was nothing but a forest. They had cut all the trees down around the forest, and they put us in there, and there was absolutely nothing. We had to make sleeping quarters out of pine boughs, bark, logs that they had left from the trees they cut. We had no latrines. The guys dug a ditch and put a log across to sit on. We had to go down the steep bank to the river for our water. Luckily, there was Red Cross trucks come through a couple of times while we were there and brought Red Cross parcels. They were all painted white with the Red Crosses on them. And we stayed there in that forest for, I don't know, we were probably there about 3 weeks. We had no protection from the rain or snow or whatever. This was all in March and April.
The Germans did some weird things towards the end of the war. They took several guys out of our prison camp and they shipped them off to Frankfurt. Now, at that time, Frankfurt was under attack by the American Army, and they took them from our Stalag and sent them westward, and all during the time they were on the train, they were under attack from our Air Force. At this point of the war, nobody believed the Red Cross signs that they put on the train. The Germans were famous for doing that, for marking the train with a Red Cross and shipping ammunition that way. But in this case, it really was a Red Cross train. But the train had to stop because two of the guys from my camp were on that train, and they told me about the horrendous trip they made. They had every few miles they got out of the train and they hunkered down. In fact, one of the guys was so shaken up by that you couldn't make a loud noise in his presence. I met him back in the States in the hospital, and his nerves were completely shot. And what do they do? They put him at Camp Edwards, which is right next to Otis Air Force Base. And every time the planes landed and take off, he would hit the floor. He was just a nervous wreck.
Yeah, I know you had a warning because you were on a road there after, you figured the end of the war may have been coming because the Russians were coming at you.
That's where they moved us.
So did you realize at the time did you figure that it was probably getting pretty close to the end?
We knew it. We had our own radios. We had news every morning. We had men go around to the barracks every morning and every evening and give the latest news. So we knew pretty well what was happening, and we knew that the Russians were getting mighty close. That's why they moved us, because they didn't care about protecting us. They wanted to protect themselves. They did not want to get captured by the Russians, believe me, because they treated the Russians terrible, and the Russians showed no mercy towards them.
How many guards did you have on that march? Germans?
Not very many. The funny part of it is they were so short of military men, they went out and got a bunch of these old farmers and whatnot and put a soldier's uniform on them, and they were our guards. And they'd tell us to do something, go blow it out your you-know-what. We'd sit down and have our smokes and take our time. When we were ready, we'd get up and march. In fact, most of the PWs were in better physical condition than those guards were. So there were very few guards.
Pardon me?
Did you know that the war was
Yeah,
we
had a radio also. We had a radio in the doctor's office under the floorboards, and every night somebody would be ill, and they would go in there. A different person each night, of course. They'd go in there and they'd lift up the floorboards, and they'd get the radio out, and we'd get the BBC News. So at our morning tea, This was a British camp, as I told you. We had to have our morning tea. And incidentally, I got into the habit of drinking tea when I was a prisoner of war because of the British there. And it is absolutely true that nothing stops having your tea break.
Tea time.
Tea time is tea time.
Tea and
We were under attack
Everything
from
stopped.
the Air Force, and they gave out the yell, "Bruise up," and everybody comes out anyway, and we take our tea, and looks like they might bomb us, mightn't they? Absolutely, I have the greatest admiration in the world for the British. We knew what was going on. The news was circulated the same way it was in your camp. And in fact, we used to get messages from Shafe. They used to tell us what they want us to do, and basically what they told us is to stay put. They said, do not roam around the countryside. Stay right where you are.
You were safer to do that than to try to escape, believe me. Another.
Frank, you have a
We
question?
used to read stories of war that when they used to transfer the prisoners, they used to use the freight cars. And they used to refer to them as 10 or 50, either 10 horses or 50 men.
40 and 8. Excuse me, 40 and 8.
48. Now, did you find this to be true when
Fortunately, I didn't have to move in a 40 and 8. When we went to prison camp, we went on a troop train. It was crowded, but it was a heck of a lot better than the 40 and 8. But I know of some of the prisoners that were transported that way. Were you transported in a 40 and 8?
In a what?
Freight car.
In a freight car, right.
He was.
But their freight cars are half the size.
Well, I wasn't an officer.
Hey, give it a rest, Dave. Give it a rest. See the kind of stuff I have to take.
Oh, it's terrible.
All right, their freight cars are half the size of ours.
I know.
Oh, yeah, they're small, very small.
All right, what was your general health all this time?
Well, you know something? I was in pretty good health considering after I recovered from my initial injuries.
Is that why you were at that injury camp? Because you were one of the injured?
I was there because I was probably going to be repatriated if the war continued.
Art's not talking about his injuries, but I don't know how many of you know that when Art bailed out, his parachute never opened up. He hit the ground, and luckily it was the side of a mountain, and it had snow on it, and he slid down, hit the ground, and slid down the mountain in the snow. And that's what saved his life. He had a lot of broken bones, but that was it. He's still here to break our stones.
And he's doing a pretty good job right now.
I'm just trying to get even. Another thing I would like to tell you is, one day was a whole group of B-24s come over to camp. Quite low. You could see the bomb bay doors opening and everything else. And they just went over to camp and they dropped their bombs on this town called Krems. We were up on a high cliff, a steep cliff on the side, and the town of Krems, and that was a marshalling yard. And they were after that marshalling yard. Another day was 2 P-38s come over. They come right over our camp. Hell, they weren't more than 50 feet above the camp, diving down onto the marshalling yard. The German guard in one of the towers, the plane was headed right for it. He must have thought they were going to shoot at him. Now, these towers were, probably 25 to 30 feet high. He jumped right out of the tower to the ground and hit the ditch. He was scared than hell right there. I don't blame him.
Several times you said that you had Italians in the camp. I thought they were allies of the Germans. Why were they prisoners?
Well, They switched sides so many times. They were prisoners of war there, or companions or something. We never quite figured out what they were. No, they had fought on both sides, and they were prisoners.
After Sicily fell,
What's that, the Italians?
overthrew Mussolini, and they established the Italian co-belligerent forces.
All right, is that the Italians?
Yes, and they had an Italian co-belligerent.
Well, there was the
force.
fascists, I guess, on one side, and the good Italians on the other side. That's the way I understand it, because we had an awful lot of them in our camp.
Yes, Frank.
When you were liberated, and you said you had Russians and Italians and everything else, did the Russians go crazy and
Yes.
go after the Germans?
Yes, they did. They certainly did. They went into town and they hung some people from the lamppost. They hung some of the local political leaders from the lamppost. They also broke into a boxcar in the railroad yard and got what they thought was whiskey, and it turned out to be paint thinner, and it killed a lot of them.
The day that the colonel came after we were liberated, which was a day or two after we were liberated, he told the guys to stay in the camp. Don't go out. Stay where you are until we can get you out of here. Well, you might as well talk to the floor, because these guys didn't listen. And a whole bunch of them took off and went down the road. They went into the town. When they come back, they had ambulances, motorcycles, cars, trucks full with potatoes, bacon, anything they could go. They just walked in the stores, took all the food, put it in the trucks, and brought it back to camp, divided it amongst everybody. And I ate. The Germans always ate their. They used to. The German guard that was in the Red Cross clothing building. I was in charge of it for my barracks to get the clothing for the guys. And I used to spend all my time over there shooting the bull with the guys. And he'd have his lunch. He'd have a couple of slices of that sawdust bread. And he'd take the bacon and slice off the bacon, cold bacon, and eat it with the bread. So after we were liberated and the guys brought this food back, I tried the same thing. Oh man, did I get sick. Man.
In comparison, though, the Americans, we had prisoners over here.
Treating them like God.
You know, they didn't want to go back.
That's right.
Right. And I say to say, you guys are the original Hogan's heroes.
I want to tell you one quick thing about that. There's a picture here. If you have a chance to take a look, this is what the prison camp looks like today. It's a warehouse. It's a supermarket or something like that. But
and I have a book here full of all kinds of pictures taken in the camp and in the forest.
Well, I forgot the point I was going to mention.
Must have been a lie.
Yes, sir.
One base that I was on here in the States had a German PW camp on it, and it was ironic or something that the American soldiers who didn't get back from camp to camp on time, was in the brig, they would be out picking up cigarette butts, and for every 3 American prisoners, there would be 2 guards with sidearms and shotguns to guard them. Over at the compound for the German prisoners, the farmers would load up, come in every morning with their trucks, load up 20 or 30 prisoners on their trucks. One MP, with all he had on was a .45, would get in the front of the truck, and out they would go, and they wouldn't come back until night.
Well, I heard they used to let them go into town without any guards and go to the movies and everything else. I don't know how true.
I know what I wanted to.
Not where I was.
I know what I wanted to mention. I correspond to an English young man whose father had been in World War II and had been a prisoner of war. And he was telling me he had gone to this prison camp where I had been. After World War II, we used this to imprison the Germans. We were still, it was kind of ironic. It was a switch. They were using it to put them in. And the prisoner of war of the Americans was complained to him that he said that the Germans treated the prisoners a lot better than the Americans treated the Germans.
Don't doubt it. Oh, they treated us quite well. I can't complain myself.
Oh, you're here.
I'm here, right.
Perhaps you could help me clear up a question in my mind about Germans being put in camps here. I was 6 years old when the Second World War ended. I can remember at about age 5 going to a barbed wire compound near the outskirts of Baltimore where I lived, where people were kept inside, Germans, and I'm not sure whether they were POWs or German Americans who were rounded up like, let's say, the Japanese.
I don't think they rounded up the Germans.
We didn't round up any
They
Germans.
must have been POWs then, but we little kids could go right up to the barbed wire, and the people inside fed us candy through the barbed wire. They wanted to bring us around and see little kids.
Well, we had one young girl, German girl. She used to come outside of the fence, and the guys would stand there and they would throw her D-bars, and she'd stand there and lift up her dress, and the guys would throw D-bars to her to keep her low.
Were these guys in uniform?
My memory is
You don't
very
remember?
vague on that. It seemed like they were all dressed in gray or brown, pretty much uniform colored.
Fort Devens had thousands of them.
Yes.
I
So
understand
did Camp Edwards.
they even had prisoners of war at Bradley Field.
Oh yeah, they had them all over the place.
Go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Go
The
ahead.
compound at Bradley was where the Air Guard is today. And that's where the POW.
They had them. They had every a lot. I think practically every camp had some.
I think a lot of them in America were
Germans didn't put us
quartermasters.
in any camps. I mean,
They were
any air bases or anything like that. They were just camps. Period.
Down at Camp Edwards, when I came back from overseas, and I was in a hospital down there, they had the Afrika Corps. These guys had been captured way back in Africa. And let me tell you, they were a fine-looking bunch of guys. Ooh, I'm glad that we got them as prisoners of war. They were very fit.
Hey, Arthur, I have one question, and this is,
I think
I
we're
thought
right.
of this a lot. How big was it, the camp, the whole prison camp? As big as the town of Cheshire, probably, or close to it?
Well, I can only talk about mine. Mine was not nearly that big. No, ours was probably about a bit as big as the prison up here.
Oh.
All of the different prisons.
Art and I researched this pretty good. Some of those buildings were, 40 feet across and 100 feet long.
Yeah.
What was that? The camp, the PW camps?
How big was yours? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, it was in that general area. We had 8 barracks altogether. And 4,300 men there. There was approximately 300 to 350 guys in the barracks. But they weren't all used as barracks. Like I say, there was the Red Cross building, there was the theater, there was the hospital, and the rest of them were all GIs. We had 8 men to a bunk. The bunk was about, maybe 5 feet wide, about 6 foot long, 4 on the bottom and 4 on the top. Yeah. They had, the only bulbs they had in the barracks were about 40 watt. And you try to play poker with a 40 watt bulb, it's kind of tough. So with my key, I went to the German barracks next door, and I stole the 100-watt bulb. And we used to put that over the table where we played cards, so we could see what we were doing. Then you know how the socket is glued to the glass or something? I don't know how they do it. But the socket came loose, but the wires were still connected. So I went out and tore shingles off of or tar paper off the barracks, melted the tar, and put that in there and put that socket back there again. And we were still able to use the bulb.
Did all of the bases in the states here have prisoners of war? When I went through B-17 school in Amarillo, Texas. We had Italian prisoners of war that used to go around and clean up all the grass.
I don't know if they all did, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Especially.
Captain Kilmer had all the Germans in the kitchen back, and they brought us out there for a nice meal. All these Germans are there waiting on us at all. They're all.
Yeah, they were eating like kings, right?
Really.
They had a maid. That was the best duty.
Out of the 6 or so bases that I was at, there was only one that had German PWs.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I never was at a base that had any.
Yeah, Fort Devens had German PWs on KP too. Yeah, they did.
I guess that's it. Well, there's a gentleman here.
On the barracks, they had a place outside of Frankfurt. Bad Soden was a PW camp, and it was all officers. Them things were still there in 1948 with a tar paper on top and all that. We had to use them on the girl and they left living quarters. So they were treated good. The officers.
We had a big latrine for our barracks, one on one side of the road and one on the other side of the road. But there was a latrine in the front and the back of each barracks. But we didn't use them because of sanitary reasons. We were able to go out to the latrine out in the back, and that had about 50 holes in it, so there was plenty of room for everybody. Except that they used to fill up, and that's when the ITIs would come in and use the honey wagon and dip it out and put it in that honey wagon and take it away.
Thank you.